Joining me now, former FBI special agent and Fox News contributor Nicole Parker. Nicole, it's great to have you with us this morning. What do we expect to get out of some of these question and answer sessions? Obviously, Hunter has refused to go behind closed doors to answer questions.
Right. I mean, this is an important moment for everybody because everyone has been asking these questions. What has been going on this entire time? And Americans are very anxious to understand. Obviously, Hunter Biden's woes are problematic. And as a former FBI agent, seeing some of the things that he has not been charged with or was not charged with and was reluctantly charged with, as it contradicts how those on the other side of the political spectrum have literally been looked at and charged with a vengeance. This is extremely important for people to understand what happened. Obviously, this is behind closed doors, but it's going to be multiple witnesses that are going to be coming forward, and that is how you're going to piece together what actually happened. Although we're very concerned about what Hunter Biden was involved with, we want to understand how it links to President Joe Biden and his involvement. That is what really is the most problematic and why this inquiry is happening in the first place. I think it'll be very interesting to hear what is said, what is reported. And, you know, you bring up an interesting point about Kevin Morris, the attorney. Learning about his relationship, that he was a fairly new attorney for Hunter Biden, and all of a sudden he is now paying off exorbitant amounts of money and loan and taxes. That's just not exactly normal. So I think it's going to be very interesting to piece everything together. And some of these people we've heard from before. I've heard about, you know, Tony Bobulinski, who I understand is going to be testifying in February. But we're going to be taking all of the pieces. Well, the committee is going to be taking all of the pieces and seeing what exactly happened. And let me just, again, I cannot overstate this. Those IRS whistleblowers, that took so much courage and integrity to come forward. Without them, we would have no idea about much of this.
No, that's a great point. And Nicole, you also bring up a great point, which is that the president has changed his story on this multiple times. First, it's I didn't know about the business dealings. Then it wasn't I wasn't involved in them. And now it's I haven't profited from them. And Lee, that's exactly what the House needs to try to show, that in some way the president was enriched by Hunter's business dealings. That's how they need to bring him into this.
The inconsistent story, I think, is really problematic for a number of reasons. It's just he keeps changing his tune. And that's why I think more than 70% of Americans do believe when Trump talks about this two-tier system of justice. American people believe that there are two different systems of justice that are applied. That, you know, right now we've got former President Trump with 91 indictments. Here we've got something that seems like this hasn't been taken seriously until those whistleblowers, as you're talking about, just came forward. You say that what you're seeing here isn't something that you would expect, or some things that are just not normal. What is most concerning that you're looking at right now of everything that's come out that we should all be like, let's laser focused on? Because I think it's complicated to a lot of people, all of the different pieces here.
I mean, it's extremely complicated. I think just the matter of what y'all stated, the inconsistencies in how the relationships were, the business relationships. You know, obviously he offloaded the 10% stake ownership in the private equity firm and the Chinese private equity firm. What relationship did he have with China, and how are we compromised because of that? I'm always concerned about our national security. How are we compromised? And that they need to get to the bottom of it. And I'm glad that Hunter Biden has agreed to finally come forward February 28th behind a closed door session to answer questions. If you have nothing to hide, come forward. Tell everything that you're involved with. And I'm glad that it's happening now. I wish it had happened sooner. But this is something that we deserve to understand. And let's see what happens.
Instead, he shows up and he makes it, you know, an opportunity to sort of do a little press for himself. Some are saying that actually might be because of the documentary that Kevin Morris is working on with him and staging some of these, you know, when he showed up at his own hearing and then walked out. Let's switch gears for a moment, Nicole, while I have you talk about this. Federal investigators are asking banks to now search and flag private financial transactions that had phrases like Trump, MAGA, Bass Pro Shop, Dick's Sporting Goods as part of their investigation into January 6th. So you've got the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan. He's requested a transcribed interview with Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and FBI officials. Your reaction to this, because it seems like a real broad overreach for the banks to be using search terms like that to label people specifically. And I can think of instances where if you were looking at other groups of people and trying to label them in certain ways, there would be complete outrage from the public as a result of it, Nicole.
Absolutely. And again, here we go again with the different treatment of individuals. That is why I walked away from the FBI. It was a career that I loved, but over and over, I saw the difference in treatment of how we treated certain individuals on one side of the political spectrum and those on the other. And it is entirely unacceptable. I think what's most alarming about this situation is that the FBI went to some of these banks. We are aware of Bank of America, and said, look, can you please turn over the transactions between January, 5th and 6th of 2021. And the bank did, turn over information, a list of those that had done credit and debit transactions on those dates and those timeframes. That is extremely broad and overreaching. The FBI, your job is to do the least intrusive method. I am not, as an agent, permitted to go out and get a wide net of information and then figure out what I'm going to do with it later. That is entirely inappropriate. And frankly, the chief of the domestic terrorism operations section at Headquarters learned of the information that had been turned over to the FBI by Bank of America, and he thought, uh-oh, and he went into the FBI system and attempted to take that information out because he thought that it was an overreach and that those people hadn't been accused of an allegation of a federal crime. You can't just go get information on every American citizen in this broad range.
Yeah.
And frankly, I believe that the FBI probably circumvented the subpoena process through their private sector contacts. As a special agent, I never got records from a bank without a subpoena. In fact, even with a subpoena, many times I had to pull teeth.
Yeah.
And so it's extremely alarming to me, and it needs to be looked into.
And that's the biggest part of the problem. That's the reason that we have systems and procedures. And if you do circumvent them and you're taking liberties, then all of a sudden, that's when the system starts to crumble altogether. But Nicole, I want to get to this before we let you go. Customs and Border Protection sources telling Fox News that there have been more than 96,000 known gotaways at the southern border since October 1st. Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy grilling the Biden administration on this yesterday. Watch this.
Does President Biden want to locate these folks who have disappeared into this country to parts unknown?
The president, one of the reasons that the president is having these negotiation procedures or process with the Senate, with both Republicans and Democrats, as I've said many times before, is because we want to deal with what's going on at the border. He's taken this very seriously. So we're doing what we can, right, at the border.
Well, the president has acknowledged that there's an issue, but he's also asking for tons of money to fix it. Meanwhile, you've got the state of Texas continuing to install razor wire at Shelby Park and Eagle Pass, despite the Supreme Court ruling that Border Patrol agents can cut or clear that wire out. Nicole, it is a mess at the southern border. Americans are very well aware of that as we head into the polls in November.
Right. It's not just a mess. It's actually a crisis. And border security equals national security. And when there is no border, your national security is highly at risk. There are so many potential threats crossing that border. We have no idea who is in our nation, and that is entirely unacceptable. And this is not a new problem. This has been going on for years. Frankly, since this administration took over, it has been a wide open border. I myself am a native Texan. This is concerning. As an FBI agent, I was investigating and, working on things related to human trafficking. That is a real problem. So not only is it a humanitarian crisis, it's an economic crisis. Now the United States is being faced with taking care of all of these individuals who aren't even here legally, yet veterans can't get the help and support that they need.
Yeah.
They've served our country with honor, and they're taking a backseat to migrants. I'm sorry, but as a Texan, we have to defend our state. We have to defend our nation. And this is at the top of the list of concerns in this upcoming election. Who is going to take care of this border? That's who people are going to vote for.
Yeah, and when it comes to national security and security of Americans in general, Nicole, the latest headline that illegal immigrants can fly on airplanes without ID. I mean, they grill you at the airport if you are a citizen here. I've tried to fly, and my name doesn't match exactly the way it's supposed to between my license and my ticket, and I almost miss my flight. But now, if you're an illegal immigrant, you can get on an airplane. That just really got me. Nicole Parker, great to see you today. Thank you so much for your insight.